Hello, so good evening, everybody, and welcome to this meeting of the Housing Management Board. My name is Alex Marsh. I'm the independent chair of this board, and outside of that, I am Professor of Public Policy at the School for Policy Studies at the University of Bristol. And we'll move on to the first item of the agenda to welcome, not just welcome everybody, but to introduce each other. I'm conscious we've got some new members. I'm also conscious that it's quite a long time since we last met, so we may need to introduce each other anyway. So I will work around my screen and invite you to introduce yourselves. So first will be Sarah.
Good evening, my name's Sarah Spicer and I'm Business Innovation Manager within Housing and Landlord Services.
Then it will be Philip. Philip? He's frozen. Ross, yeah. You'll be next.
Yeah, he's frozen, yeah.
Hi, I'm Ross Dallymore. I'm here as the leaseholder representative.
Liz?
Good evening, my name's Liz Cheetham. I work for Housing and Landlord Services and I'm the engagement team leader.
Councillor Godwin, would you like to say a little bit about your role? This is your first time at our meeting.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Hi, everyone. My name's Councillor Helen Godwin, and I'm councillor for Southmead Ward and also cabinet member for Women, Families and Homes. So, as you may know, Councillor Smith retired from the council in the summer, and I have inherited some of his portfolio. So, what we've done is we've split the housing portfolio now into housing delivery. So that's all the house building that we're trying to do, and that now sits with the mayor. And I've got responsibility for the rest of the portfolio. So that's obviously tenant services, our relationship with the private rented sector, homelessness and rough sleeping as well. So the intention behind that is to refocus, I think, actually, and put a bit more emphasis on tenants and residents and effectively people who have access to social housing in Bristol. So hopefully that's a good thing from the point of view of this board. But I'm looking forward to sort of listening mainly today and just getting up to speed on some of the issues. But obviously I'm available for people with queries or to get in touch with me at any time.
Thank you very much. Zara is next.
Hi everyone, good evening. My name's Zara Naylor. I'm Head of Service for Responsive Repairs, and that's working within Housing and Landlord Services.
Councillor Sargent.
Hi, I'm Jo Sargent. I'm Councillor for Avonmouth and Lawrence Western Ward and a member of the board.
Thank you very much. Pete.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Pete Dorr. I am a Fellow of the Chartered Institute of Housing. I'm Alex's deputy on this board, and I represent the needs and interests of the, 27,500 tenants, being the representative for the Northwest. And in fact, welcome, Helen, because you are, of course, my own councillor. So I'm looking forward to working with you as successfully as your predecessor, Paul.
Thank you, Pete. Christine?
Hi, it's Christine Jory here from Redfield St George, Area 4 representative tenant.
Thank you. Councillor Clough?
Councillor Harriet Clough. I think technically I'm the Lib Dem representative from the Housing Management Board. I tend to have an interest in stuff like accessibility as well, just because I am disabled, know a lot of people are disabled with council housing and things.
Thank you for that. Pete Edwards, would you like to introduce yourself, your first meeting?
Yeah, I'm Peter Edwards and I'm a tenant member for Forum 1. Poor Richard had to retire, I think, and I got elected, and I'm pleased to be here.
Welcome.
Thank
Philip,
you.
are you back with us?
Yeah, I don't know what's happening. It keeps breaking up. My name's Philip Morris. I'm a tenant rep. I live in Bedminster.
Thank you for the south of the city. And that leaves us just with... Thank you, Philip. And that just leaves us with Steve.
Good evening, I'm Steve Gregory. I work for the Democratic Services team. I'm the clerk for this meeting tonight.
So thank you, everybody, and welcome to the board. This is the second meeting we've held via Zoom, so I'm sure many people are now sort of super familiar with Zoom, but it's a good idea to have your microphones on mute when you're not speaking. It's a good idea to either sort of use the raise hand function when you're, if you want to contribute to the meeting, or you can physically stick your hand up, because we need to sort of manage it a little bit more on Zoom because of the way the software gets indigestion if we try and talk at once. So so that's just something in terms of process. So we've got apologies for absence, Steve.
So I'm trying to email the agenda to Councillor Joe Sargent. Yes, we have apologies for received from Councillor Richard Eddy and Paul Goggin.
And Kelly will be joining us later.
Kerry Bell, sorry, I was about to mention, Kerry Bell hopes to join us a bit later on.
Yes. And you'll notice that Julian isn't with us, and Zara's going to field all questions that we would have previously directed at Julian, because he's not well. So let's move on to item 2. For those of us who were there, can we cast our minds back to the 29th of July in a previous lifetime? Can we just have a look at whether or not anybody wants to pick up anything in terms of accuracy for the minutes? Are we comfortable that that's a record of the discussion as it was? Philip, do you want to pick up something there?
Hello. Yeah, I never received any minutes.
Right.
Okay, well, we'll make sure you do next time. I can't think about it now, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
So if we're comfortable with accuracy, we'll just, if we just run through that. There were only a couple of identified action points. On the second page under Housing and Landlord Services, Pete and Councillor Clough were going to liaise by email in relation to adaptations. I'm assuming that has taken place.
No, that hasn't, but I will catch up on that now. I've been reminded about it.
Okay, super. Right.
Because there is, I'm putting a piece together to either go to people scrutiny or elsewhere, because DFGs are getting really backlogged. I can only speak personally, but it's taken over 2 years to get adaptations done to a housing association property via the DFG process.
Which I think was yes, I think that was our way into that particular item, wasn't it, last time? And I think that seems to be something which we absolutely need to pursue.
And I've still got half the adaptation to go. So if mine's this bad, what does the average council tenants look like?
Okay, so we'll keep that as a live item to be pursued after this meeting. Great. I think just for note today, under 7 on the same item, we got an action for the Director of Housing around DFGs to bring an item to this meeting, but he wasn't able to attend this meeting. And I think holding it over, we've kept the agenda today a little bit lighter and pick that up next time around. I think we need to make sure that one is on the radar for next time around. And I think I think those were the only 2 outstanding actions from last time around that we needed to minute. So if we're okay with that, we move on to item 3, which is the public forum. And as far as I'm aware, we had no questions submitted in advance, and we're not looking for any interventions to be made at this stage. I'm looking for confirm that, colleagues. Okay, Steve, that looks like
yeah, that's correct. Sorry,
that's where we are.
I'm still trying to get this agenda to Councillor Sargent.
Right, no problem. So that brings us to item 4, which is our first substantive item. So this board has been engaged with the moving forward together process in terms of providing feedback on progress and ideas and inputs into how that might be taken through to the next stage. So this is for new members of the committee. This is something which we've been having an eye on for a little while now. And so I'll hand over to Sarah to give us an update on where the project is now and sort of what the next steps look like. So over to you, Sarah.
Thank you, Alex. I will screen share. We do have some slides that were part of the slide pack that was shared with you. So I will get these on the screen now. Hopefully that's large enough for everyone to see. I do have a small problem. If I try to put them on slideshow, I quite often freeze everything. So I'm going to try and work through them like this. So do let me know if there are any problems with visibility. As Alex said, we have brought items to the board before on moving forward together. And as it's our service transformation programme, it's incredibly important. And so the board agreed that it would be a standing item that we would discuss at every meeting. So just as a reminder, the programme is based on moving towards our vision of becoming a world-class housing and landlord service, something that really meets the needs of our residents, that we provide a great place for people to work, and that we've got equality and diversity at the heart of everything that we do. Last year, we surveyed all of our residents, all of our tenants living in our council homes, and we had an amazing response, and we had 6 clear priorities, and these have been at the heart of everything that we're doing. So it's about trying to make sure we deliver residents' priorities of being local, of listening, making it easier for people to contact us. We've heard, very clearly how difficult that can be, to build trust and keep our promises, and to do more to tackle safety and security on our estates. So we went into this process back in the spring, which, as you can imagine, was quite challenging given COVID and the restrictions that we suddenly faced on meeting face-to-face. But that hasn't stopped us from working through co-design. So what we mean by that is working with a group of colleagues and staff who work on the front line to make sure that we're working with people who really know what it means to be delivering services to residents. And over the course of the last 6 months, we've had 60 workshops, and we've engaged with about half of our workforce. So we have a large workforce, almost just over 1,000 people working in housing and landlord services. So from our perspective, it's been an amazing success to have done that, to have done this when we haven't been able to have face-to-face meetings, when people are working hard to deliver services through COVID, has been an amazing success from our point of view. During that process, we've listened to feedback, changed the way that we're working to try and make sure that we are responding to things that people raise with us. We've also reached out and engaged with residents. Obviously, technology can make that a little bit harder for some people. Not everyone is able to engage online. So communication was a little slow to start with, but we, as well as having workshops, so sending out invites for people to meet with us and talk with us, we've also been sending out surveys. So we've been doing that via social media and to some of our involved tenants. And every week we've been contacting almost 500 people to get feedback and asking a range of questions, all linked back to those 6 priorities. What does being local and visible mean to people? What does that look like? And we have we've had quite a lot of feedback, and as you can see, we've just made a note of some of the issues that people have fed back to us and some of the things that people would like to see. So that's included more local surgeries and face-to-face contact with housing officers, better maintenance and upkeep of our estates and our buildings, and better management of fly tipping and litter and waste, faster response to ASB issues, some suggestions to ask us to look to if we can install more CCTV around estates, more youth facilities, and a wider variety of ways for people to participate. I think in this day and age, I think we recognise the fact that we can modernise how we reach out and how we engage with residents and how people can feed back to us. In terms of where we're at now, we have just a couple of workshops to work through to get us to the stage where we have an operating model. And what we mean by that is, what are all of the things, what are all the things we need to change in order to be able to deliver this? So whether or not they're structural, whether or not it's more training, whether or not it's different ways of working, how do we piece ourselves together to make sure that we are delivering a service that's got residents' priorities at its heart, and that we're addressing the challenges that have been raised, so that whether that's local and accessible and all of the 6 items that we explored earlier. we want to make sure that whatever we design, we test it first to make sure it works. We're such a large service that we need to make sure that whatever we're doing is right before we roll it out. So we will look to pilot that. And alongside testing a new operating model, we will be looking at different ways of working and joining up with other parts of Bristol City Council. So I think, again, we recognise that our tenants have said sometimes we're not joined up in the way we respond, whether or not that's just within housing and landlord services or whether or not it's with other departments. And we know that that's an area that needs to be improved. So we will focus on that. And another area of focus will be training and development for our employees. So particularly looking at our values and our behaviours and our customer service to make sure that we are providing the best service we possibly can. So we, as I said, will prepare for a pilot and we will look to try some new ways of working in the spring. And we want to continue to work with residents in the meantime to plan that. So we will set up a resident advisory group to inform the resident engagement plans within the pilot. And we will also look at how we get resident feedback during that pilot to see whether or not what we're doing is actually making a difference, because that's the important thing, is that it makes a difference and that our residents and tenants can see that our services look and feel different and are delivering what they need from us. So there might be a couple of dates that are for the version that were sent out in the pack, but we're aiming to complete the operating model by the end of December. And then in January, we'll be reviewing that with wider stakeholders. So we'll start to share that and get views on whether or not the proposals that we've made are going to deliver the changes that we're looking at. And we will look to pilot that, run that pilot in the spring. And then that gives us a chance, as I said, to test it, refine it, make any changes before we roll out further changes by the end of the year. So I am going to stop screen sharing and come back and see if there are any questions from anyone on the board with regards to that.
Colleagues, so I've got Pete and then Philip. Pete? And yeah, and then Councillor Sargent.
Yeah, sorry, just trying to unmute that. I guess my question is around the resident advisory group, which is to be set up, and where that fits in with the period between the end of September and the pilot in the spring. Is that the period in which you're looking, Sarah, to gain involvement, and what would be the meaningful involvement at that stage? I'm very aware that half of the staff have been surveyed, but I very much doubt that you've been through half of the 27,500 tenants, because that would just be unachievable. So I guess my question is around meaningful engagement through the resident advisory group, because if you've come up with an operating model and a series of proposals, I would want there to be the opportunity for active, engaged tenants to be able to impart feedback on that prior to the pilot. Is that going to be possible?
Yes, so I think, you know, if we can get the resident advisory group set up early next year, Pete, I completely think that that's possible. The whole point of having the pilot is, you know, we'll work through stages of sharing. This is what we're planning to do. How does that look? Gather any feedback, any suggestions about other things that we can do, things that we can try to do differently, and then keep them involved in measuring the impact and how that works for us when we're actually delivering it. So yes, I think it is a real opportunity to involve, and as you said, it's not going to be half of all of our tenants, but I think it can be a group of meaningful size who can engage in really good quality conversation about what we're trying to do and try to work with to explore whether or not that will work.
Thank you. So next I've got Philip, and then we'll just move around the screen. Philip, and then Councillor Sargent.
Yeah, I just query, more local surgeries and face-to-face with housing officers. Well, housing officers, unless it's going to change, are only part-time. And our housing officer works Wednesday afternoon, Friday and Thursday and Friday, half a week. And it's, well, I don't know, I've never faced the man in the moon. And I think that's easier than finding a housing officer. I can see a cloud in the sky, but I can't catch one. And something drastically needs to change because we have serious issues in Bedminster, and trying to get hold of a housing officer is impossible because she's got so much work to do in 2.5 days.
Can I respond to that, Chair?
Of course, Zara, please.
Phil, with regards the pilot, we will make sure that we cover off working patterns of housing officers. We will make sure that within the pilot, people understand the accessibility, the times that people are available. So we will publicise that in advance of the pilot. And those tenants that are local and want to be engaged directly with the pilot, we would encourage that also beyond the advisory group. So we will not go into the pilot environment without covering off a lot of the issues that you and I have discussed previously in other meetings. So we are aware of what we need to set up and get your input into that output so that we can then progress the pilot. But we absolutely understand that fundamentally the local delivery will only prove successful as long as we've got the housing officers with a reasonable patch being able to manage the issues on a day-to-day basis. We totally accept that, and that is something that we see loud and clear with the feedback that we've had so far.
Thanks for that, Zara. So, well, good evening, Kerry. Welcome. Kerry's joined us. She was only able to join us lately. And the other thing to say is I believe that Christine is going to have to pop out in a moment and then rejoin us hopefully in 20 minutes time. So next question was from Councillor Sargent.
Yeah, sorry, apologies for me. I thought I was on mute and I was trying to sort out my son's tea. Yeah, I mean, I've seen this presentation quite a lot, and I am really understanding where Philip's coming from with his comments. I am quite concerned about how you are going to be able to deliver this, and I'm not saying I don't have any faith in you. I just know your numbers are so thin on the ground that I still have yet to be convinced. So obviously the pilot would be very useful for that. What I wanted to ask though, well, there were a couple of things. First of all, the pilot, I'd like to understand what's going to, what is it? What are the criteria you're going to need in a particular area that will make that area be your pilot? And the other thing I wanted to ask about is this thing about place, because the biggest moans we have are that the people don't have access to a person on the ground, so to speak. And I know that will change in time because people will become more tech savvy, but we still have a lot of tenants who are not able to communicate that way. And I think the reality of that the issue is around the fact that there are no longer any housing officers as opposed to ers, and locations are going to vary across the city, and I'm also worried about the safety of the staff in terms of how they're going to be supported, so that's something of concern. And then the other, I did have another one. I think I've forgotten it. I might have to come back on that one. So if I could just park those with you, and then maybe I'll put my hand up in a bit when I've remembered the other thing that stuck in my brain.
Okay. So in terms of how we will select the pilot, one of the things that we're looking at the moment is if we can find a pilot area that's quite representative of Bristol, by which I mean has a real mix of different property types, has a mixed demographic, so that it feels as if it's quite representative of Bristol on the whole. So we're looking at different areas and the sorts of properties, and as I said, the demographics of people who live there, to try and make sure we get somewhere quite representative of Bristol. In terms of place, I know that I won't necessarily be able to address all of those concerns today, but we are looking at how do people work in the local area? What office amenities do we have as Bristol City Council? What office amenities do our partners have that we might be able to use so that people can place themselves locally and carry out visits and still have access to the type of amenities that they want and need. And safety is always going to be of paramount importance to us. So there's a corporate piece of work at the moment looking at our lone worker system, and we will need to make sure that we are we're doing everything possible to safeguard our staff who are working out on site. And that is something that is important to us and is something that we do on a day-to-day basis anyway. And I'm sure Zara can attest to that. Most of her staff are out and about on a daily basis anyway. Zara, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, what I was going to add around the number of housing officers, we recognise that we don't have enough housing officers, Councillor Sargent, so we do need to make sure that we're using the data around the patch sizes, the amount of repairs, for the patches. We're trying to gather the analysis so that we can make sure that we fully resource the pilot successfully. And with regards the safety aspect of staff, I mean, just now through COVID, we're able, we've got risk assessments. We've got the new bold lone working system that we're piloting in the estate management team as I speak now, and there will be a regional support network available to an individual should they need it. Further details on that we will be able to describe once we get into the detail of what the pilot looks like.
Can I just come back on that on a couple of things?
Yeah.
First of all, I remembered what it was I was going to ask, and that was how will the change to the service, I mean, one sort of indication of success will be a reduction in the number of emails that councillors get complaining about the fact they're not getting the support they need, and I think that is something that you need we need a bit of engagement on as part of this process, is to understand what emails we're getting, not so much complaints. I mean, a lot of it's to do with home choice, but if you're on the waiting list, if you're a council tenant but you're on the waiting list to try and get upgrade to something a bit bigger, for example, then you become you're still part of the housing system, the council housing system, and therefore you should be getting the support that you need. Now, I'm not saying that I don't want to do anything to help, but I do sometimes feel that I'm doing someone else's job and that person perhaps just doesn't exist anymore, so I have to do it. And I'm not going to be that good at it because I'm not that experienced. I don't know the ins and outs of housing. I'm not a trained housing officer. So for me, that is quite an important thing to measure. And then the other thing, coming back on the pilots, I think you might have to consider 2 pilot locations. And the reason I say that is that you said you want to try and capture a really diverse place, and I think the problem that you've got is I think you're going to need one close to the centre and you're going to need one further out, because you will find that those 2 types of housing are very different from each other in a lot of ways. And I think it would be worth considering. I know that might be a little bit more work, but I think you might want to consider 2 locations for a pilot.
Thank you, Jo. It's certainly something we can take away and explore.
And just to follow up on the point about the emails, would the board sort of find it helpful that next time we meet, in the next update, we have some sort of an outline of what the criteria for success are, both for the pilot? How is that being evaluated? What are the indicators that are going to be used to think through whether the new model is delivering, both in pilot terms, but also, I guess, as it rolls out to become business as usual? Pete?
Just really to confirm what you said there, Alex, I think Professor Marshall is quite right that we do need to keep an eye on the pilot as well as the overall delivery of the programme, so it would be helpful to bring it back. But secondly, actually picking up on what Zara was saying there, I personally, to pick up on Joe's point, yes, as someone who is a trained housing officer, who is a fellow of the Institute of Housing, I would be really interested in having the board have a presentation from the human resources side of the recruitment, the retention, and the difficulties around getting housing officers. Now, I'm very mindful, for example, that when Professor Malpass retired from the University of the West of England, the School for Housing and Urban Studies was shut down. Similarly, changes at City Bristol College meant that housing is no longer taught there. So despite being the largest region, Government Office Southwest, we don't have anywhere that trains people in housing within our region anymore. And I know Professor Mask will point out the amazing research that goes on at the University of Bristol, but it's more on the policy side than on the delivery side. And we don't have accredited pathways into membership of the Chartered Institute of Housing. Now, one of the issues around retention is obviously around opportunity. And I would be interested in what career progression, what training with the Chartered Institute of Housing, what opportunities we're creating within the role of landlord services to enable people to have the landlord services group as a first choice of career. Because I see quite a lot of people coming in from other departments just because it's a pay rise, just because it's a progression in their career, just because it gets them a little bit closer to a higher final salary pension. And I'm sorry, but that's not a good enough reason to be managing 850 tenancies as a minimum. So I would like the board to look again. I'd like the city to be talking to the board about the recruitment, the retention, the difficulties, and possible solutions. And I can see Helen wants to jump in there, so I will concede.
Yeah, no, thanks, Pete. I just sort of think that there's such a strong connection, isn't there, between the workforce and the quality of the workforce in the best possible terms, in terms of the availability of training. Sarah and I were in a separate meeting today talking about not just equalities training within the workforce, but also looking at trauma-informed training and thinking about the vulnerability of so many of our tenants and residents and how we can respond to those needs. And I think there's a very strong link between a career rather than a job, offering a career to people within housing, and frankly then the quality of the service that our tenants will get. And that's, there are obviously massive issues around health and safety and the welfare, but I also think that it's really important to think about that kind of nourishment, well-being, and career opportunities as well. And I do, my ward is Southmead, so we've got a large percentage of council tenants in our area, and the majority is exactly as Joe says. A lot of the casework relates to lettings and to home choice, but when it's not about that, it's generally about being a tenant and repairs, antisocial behaviour, and I think that antisocial behaviour element is another really strong reason why we need people on the ground as much as possible, because of those relationships with community policing as well, which are kind of increasingly important, aren't they? So I think when we look at the pilots, and I totally agree with Joe in terms of having diverse areas to look at if we possibly can, and obviously that there'll be a resources issue there that will, we can't make promises on that, but I think it's a good thing for us to explore. But as we sort of look at that, I think we really need to be looking at what's going to make a real difference. I'm not really particularly interested in all this work for a few tweaks. We've got to be looking at significant change of experience for our tenants. Absolutely. And I think everybody wants that, but we've just got to hold ourselves quite tight to make sure that we get that. Yeah.
I think that's a couple of really clear steers on how the conversation can proceed when we come back, and things that we can bring to you next time. So I am confident by then that things would have moved on, and we will be able to revisit all of these in a little bit more detail. So I think we know that we'll be looking in March time for the next board meeting. So by then. Sorry, Zara.
Sorry, I was just going to pick up on the career progression and the career opportunities within MFT, certainly within the technical service. I know we've broadly talked about the housing officer, but within the technical service, we do experience high turnover within surveyor roles. So we are looking as part of MFT to do a career progression type career structure, so that people can move through the structure and succeed up through to further their career from the technical point of view. And I think we are also trying to look at that through the eyes of the housing officer as well, so that we've got some career progression for that role. But we are trialing that in the technical service first, simply because we do have a significant issue around surveyor recruitment and retention. So that's the forerunner for career progression and some sort of opportunity for someone in a housing role or a technical role.
So it feels like there's a steer, as you say, plenty to discuss for next time around. I think I'm paraphrasing Pete's point. There's a career progression point, but there's a route into housing roles point as well. So it's that sort of, are people arriving with the core skills that would need to be appropriate to deliver these sorts of roles? And I think that's a related but slightly different point. In terms of the item, is there anything else that anyone else wants to pick up on from the presentation? Any other points that anybody would like to make feedback to Sarah and Zara to maybe take away and share further with us next time around?
I just wanted to say that we are doing regular updates for our wider body of tenants at local housing forums. We've just had the autumn local housing forums, and we did an MFT presentation for tenants. We're also sharing regular presentation updates with our housing scrutiny panel, and I know Peter's here who can testify to that as well.
Yes.
Right, good, yes. And it'll be interesting to see, what the operating model looks like. From our previous conversations, and you were talking about consultants being involved, it has a bit of a vanguard systems thinking feel about it to me, but that may be, so part of the issue about resources is stopping doing things that don't really need doing to free up resources to put them where they do need. It's sort of rethinking the system as a whole. It would seem to be the conversation last time around, and that's a way of sort of saying, well, how do we get more housing officers? It's by stopping doing other things that actually we don't. I think you said failure demand last time, which immediately made me think of Vanguard Consulting.
We did talk about that. So
yes.
there is that thing about getting things right first time,
yes.
about making sure that everything that we do adds value, provides value for money, and that we're concentrating all of our efforts and resources in a way that makes a difference for people. So I think you are right in the way that does link back to getting your processes right and doing things right to, as I said, maximize the impact.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So we're moving into a phase when this moves from debate and discussion and sharing into something a bit more concrete in terms of the pilot. So it'll be fascinating to see next time around.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Okay. So if that's it for that item, we'll move on to the next item, which is an item primarily, I think, for information, but it's not a million miles away from what we've just been talking about. So the social housing white paper for England was published a few weeks ago. There was a link in your pack to the executive summary. Now, not everybody got their pack, and maybe not everybody's had a chance to read that. I think I was going to just say, I was going to possibly abuse my position as chair and just say a few words about this, and then I'll invite Sarah and Zara to respond. So for those of you that don't follow the history of the policy quite as closely as some of us, we had the green paper on housing back in 2018. That was Theresa May's government's response to the Grenfell Tower tragedy and a whole set of aspirations about changing the nature of the relationship between social landlords and their tenants. It had a bunch of other things in it as well. Since then, we've been awaiting a white paper, so it's been a long time arriving. I think I saw the regulator of social housing say it was imminent at least 12 months ago. So this has now appeared. If you haven't had a chance to digest it, I won't go through all of it, but broadly speaking, it's based around the idea of a new charter for social housing tenants, which has got 7 components to it. First and foremost, a lot of emphasis on safety, to be safe in your home, Secondly, to know how your landlord is performing. So there's a sort of accountability and scrutiny component. How your complaints are dealt with, that your complaints are dealt with properly, promptly and fairly. To be treated with respect. To have your voice heard by your landlord. To have a good quality home and neighbourhood to live in. And then finally, to be supported to take your first step to ownership. So this is a set of proposals at the moment, and that underneath that, there's a whole bunch of more specific policy aspirations. Now, it's taken us 2 years to get to this point. It's going to take a chunk of time to move possibly from the white paper to legislation, which will actually bring this into being. So there's a timescale question. But I think one of the interesting things about the white paper really is it's recreate. It talks about dealing with the problems of the system, but actually what it's doing is recreating the system that a previous government in its wisdom abolished. So in 2010, a lot of the customer regulation in social housing was abolished. The National Tenants' Voice, TSA was removed. The role was circumscribed to say that actually regulators should focus on economic regulation, not customer regulation. And since then, there's been a fairly concerted campaign amongst housing organisations to say that that was a mistake, and actually that's missing something really important about the way the social housing sector should be regulated. So quite a lot of what the white paper does is says we need to beef up the role of the regulator of social housing. We need to give it a consumer regulatory role. That would involve mandating the provision of information by social landlords. It will mean new mechanisms for tenants to request information, to hold their landlord to account. It will mean better coordination between the regulator in this sector and things like the health and safety executive to make sure that concerns about fire safety and health and safety are dealt with more effectively. One of the big hurdles at the moment in the system is that the regulator can only get involved in customer issues if it can demonstrate serious detriment. That is, that the landlord is doing something so terrible that really somebody needs to step in. And organisations have campaigned to remove that for the last decade. And the white paper is proposing to get rid of the serious detriment test, which opens up the possibility for regulatory intervention sooner, or if you like, on less severe issues, if it's clear that landlords aren't delivering on the requirements to tenants. So there's a whole bunch of things going on: reforms to complaints, reforms. There's a hint at reforms to letting systems. There's a hint at changing the way ASB is treated. Interestingly, in relation to our previous conversation, the government has flagged up development and training for staff, for housing management staff, as part of the white paper, to say actually there isn't, having defunded, as Pete pointed out, having defunded training in the past. Now they've said, well, actually maybe there needs to be a look at how training in the sector is developed. So as well as capacity building on the tenant side and empowering tenants to engage, as well providing information and making reports available, but do people have the skills, the interest to engage with that meaningfully and ask sensible questions? I mean, this board is very familiar with what's going on in the world of their landlord, but that's not true of all tenants, clearly. So how can tenants be empowered? So it's actually quite a wide-ranging picture of, if you like, change that will change the balance of power between the landlord and the regulator, but also the landlord and their tenants, with the aspiration of making landlords more responsive to the concerns of current tenants, the issues that current tenants are wanting to raise. And so there's quite a lot in the white paper. I wouldn't necessarily recommend going and read it for fun, but it is of interest to those of us who want to see social housing managed effectively and well. The question now is, of course, how much of this agenda sort of actually survives and manifests itself and becomes into being as policy. But I thought it would be useful at this stage to just get reflections from the council on, if you like, how this initial responses and how it aligns to things that are already going or are going on, or how the council will take forward the process of thinking through what the implications of the green paper are for the city council. So Sarah, do you want to just respond to that?
Yeah, of course. Thank you ever so much for that introduction to the white paper, Alex, which is, I think every social landlord that I've heard from has welcomed the white paper, and we are no different. There are some really big and important messages in there that completely echo our thinking. In terms of building safety, even over the last 5 years, when our rents have been reducing and we've had to think very hard about where we invest our money, the one thing we have had as a core has been focusing in on safety. So maintaining our investment in fire safety, gas inspections, all of those things that help to make sure that people feel safe in their homes. So I think for us, we will continue to keep up with the building regulations and the changes to make sure that we can make sure that people feel safe and that we're investing in quality homes. We haven't been waiting for the white paper. So the green paper gave us some very strong hints on the direction of travel. And hopefully you'll see through moving forward together that we're already thinking about how we engage with residents, how we make residents at the heart of services. So we haven't been waiting for the paper. We already have those thoughts in the back of our minds about how we take this journey towards preparing for the changes that we expect to come along. There are some specific things that we will be doing in order to prepare for next year, and I'll talk a little bit about complaints is a separate issue. What I would say is I attended an insight session with the MHCLG earlier in the week, who were talking about the white paper and the fact that some of the changes, for example, the regulatory changes, will need to be underpinned by legislation. So they were not necessarily seeing a short time frame to implement some of these changes. So next year there will be a whole range of consultation around what they've called Decent Homes 2. So looking at future standards, looking at regulation and looking at new performance measures. So a lot of our focus will be on making sure that we are ready to respond to that consultation and be part of that engagement in trying to shape things as they move forward. So I think that would be it for my observations around Bristol City Council. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything or ask any questions on this matter.
So this is the first time it's come to this board. I'm sure it won't be the last time, but colleagues, are there any observations, if you had a look at the exec summary and the government's aspirations, or things that you want to highlight? Councillor Sargent.
Sorry, forgive me for being political, but the big elephant in the room is the fact that there aren't enough houses. So it doesn't matter how much pressure you put on social housing providers to give the best service to their tenants, when there are so many people on low incomes living in private rented accommodation because they can't get a council home. That is something that they need to do something about. And all of the other stuff would more likely fall into place if people actually had, everyone who needed it had access to social housing. End of political broadcast.
Well, I mean, just on that, I've got Philip coming in a minute, but on that, the other thing that's happening at the moment is there's a review of the HHSRS underway, the Housing Health and Safety Rating System, which has been commissioned and that's started now, and so that which is again linked to the Decent Homes. It's a component of Decent Homes, but they're reviewing that in relation to risks in the home and coming up with a new, easier to understand. But that's, you reminded me, because obviously private renting is the part of the housing system with the greatest incidence of housing hazards. So you know there's other things. It doesn't solve the problem you've raised, but there's other things going on as well in other sectors, I think.
Yeah, forgive me for coming back, but when you've got people like Philip Davis in the House of Commons who filibusters out every attempt to debate the issue of homes fit for human habitation, we're going to struggle to make anything happen in that area, because they are so driven by the so-called free market that they will fight any attempt for us to regulate private housing, unfortunately.
Well, yes. All I'll say is in relation to the HHSRS, I'm involved in the project that's doing the review. So at least I can see what the civil servants are attempting to do. Whether it gets through the political system is a different matter. Philip, you wanted to come in.
Yeah, I just want to say something rather political. Councillor Jo Sargent and her party can't claim any benefit for reducing housing shortage when they failed as to stop the sale of council properties like they've done in Scotland and Wales. And so, you know, I don't think it's a political issue. I think it's a greed issue on both sides, because when Labour were in power, they did nothing to stop it.
Yeah, I agree. I completely agree, Philip. And I can tell you I was not a member of the Labour Party during the years of the Tony Blair government. So whilst I am now, I wasn't then.
Yeah, but that's so before this descends into, I don't want too much of this to be political, but that's a fair, I mean, that the structural problems of that type are, points well made. And it was the national governments in Scotland and Wales that took those decisions. And the national government in England that took a different route and wasn't quite so far reaching in its constraints on the right to buy, for sure. And what it did at the time could be unpicked. Pete, did you want to come in?
I do. I'm going to try and avoid being political because obviously, I have had a role as the agent of a political party for the West of England, the 9 parliamentary authorities that make up our local sub-region. So I'll try and be more academic, if I may. There is a couple of very good documents. Housing Policy and Overview, written by the Treasury, sets out an amazing background to the dual role of housing, and is a great reference if you've not read it. Equally, there's a very good piece of research, Lessons from the Past, Lessons for the Future, a review of English housing policy, which I will be using to judge this new white paper. My difficulty, however, is that I do think we missed the opportunity. So to pick up on Philip's point about previous governments and house building targets, back in 2003 and 2004, Dame Barker, who's now in the House of Lords, Kate Barker, recommended a step change in house building, calling for almost 250,000 new homes each year to be built to plug the shortage, and a very large number of those being social housing. We ignored her recommendation to create a National Housing and Planning Advice Unit. We created it, and then the coalition tore it up. So even though we knew there was a housing crisis, and even though we knew that previous, in this case, Conservative governments had said, let housing benefit take the strain, and we'd moved away from delivery of new homes towards subsidy of existing private homes, we hadn't addressed the structural problem that our current, and for 40 odd years, our previous House of Commons has been absolutely packed with private landlords. And the vested interests of those private landlords have led to huge donations to political parties, have led to the tearing up of the planning system, have led to changes that do not promote the building of new homes, but instead promote the increase of the asset value of companies. So a typical house builder, a speculative house builder, doesn't actually make their money from building houses. They make it from land banking, they make it from deals that are nothing more than pleasing asset managers in the city. And until we get away from that, until we have a role of local authorities in developing decent, affordable homes at a price that people can afford to occupy, then we will continue to have the problems we have in the city today. And we need to go further. It's no longer just acceptable to build houses. We need to also look at our One City plan. We need to also look at our sustainable development goals. We need to understand that having 70, 100-year-old properties which have gas boilers are not fit for tenants in 10, 15 or 20 years' time. And the liability that we have on our asset register of the old heating systems that are going to be unaffordable to maintain, unaffordable to use, are actually a greater obligation than the entire 30-year asset programme of the city. And we need to be honest about this. We need to accept the challenge that we don't have enough homes, that the homes we have aren't fit for the future, and we need to be looking at what we're going to do about that and how.
Indeed. Well, lots of issues there that aren't in the white paper. We might argue they should be elsewhere on the agenda. And I think actually just to finish off that that point. I think actually that particular challenge, I mean, there are more acute examples of it, and that would be that the houses that are being built now are known not to comply with the government's own energy efficiency standards. They're not going to comply with MEES, and therefore we already know they're going to need retrofitting before they're built, which is a slightly odd way to go about new supply. So
but it's exactly the same thing that happens in disability, Alex.
Sure.
This has been happening with accessibility of homes for decades, so I don't understand why people are surprised there's a problem with the environmental standards.
No. But I mean, there's systemic issues which are heavily embedded. Sarah, did you want to come in on the white paper?
I was just going to say, I don't want to overpromise about bringing everything to the next board meeting, but we will have subsequent board meetings in the year, and we can easily come back and bring papers on the new build standards for the homes being built in the HRA, and we could bring back another item around how we're looking at retrofitting and testing different things that will work within our stock. So I won't commit to bringing everything, otherwise our next meeting could run into days, but we can certainly look at programming those in over time.
I think hold on to that item. I think agree that next time around the moving forward together is going to be key, because in terms of the timescale of that, you've got the pilot, you've got that will be a useful timescale for feedback from the board. But maybe these other things we hold on to and hold off until a subsequent meeting. But note that it would be good to bring it to the board to share and get some feedback on that. I think that would be entirely appropriate. As I say, there's lots of interesting developments nationally, and no doubt there are things that will materially affect sort of practice as we go forwards. So one part of the white paper, which we noted in passing there, was around complaints and responses to complaints. So if we move to item 6, which is the Housing Ombudsman. Sarah, did you want to pick up on that one?
I will do. So this is just a brief update to let you know about some changes that are happening. So I'm sure most of you will be aware, but the Housing Ombudsman is an arbitration service which deals with complaints about social housing, and it's set up to resolve disputes between tenants and leaseholders of social landlords, but it's not necessarily a watchdog or a regulator. And there are some changes happening. So with the spotlight on the social housing sector, in particular health and safety, and the need to make tenants and residents at the centre of decision making, there are some changes to the complaints handling code and some new powers being issued to, that means that they'll be able to issue complaints handling failure orders. So there's a new code which provides a universal definition of what is a complaint, a 2-stage structure for the complaints procedure with very clear timeframes, an emphasis on improved correspondence with residents, by which it means we should be doing more to promote the complaints process and to make it easier for residents who would like to complain, and also that we need to do more to demonstrate continuous learning. So although we do learn from the complaints we have and try to adapt, we need to show where we're doing that and make it clearer to our tenants what we do in response. So there are some things we're doing at the moment to prepare for those changes. So there's a self-assessment against the new code that needs to be published by the end of the year, which we're working on at the moment. Our corporate complaints policy and some of the materials need to be updated just to reflect the new national changes. And longer term, we are looking at how do we communicate out and how do we make sure that residents are aware of complaints processes, and we've got a number of avenues where we think we can do that better. Trying to get some additional resources in place so we can do improved analysis of complaints data and complaint satisfaction, so that I think Housing Ombudsman are really clear that they want us to address systemic issues. So really learn from what's been and start to see a reduction in the number of complaints we get on the same subjects. And I was wondering whether or not the Housing Management Board might like to have a few more regular updates about the complaints that we receive and the learning that we get, and whether this might be somewhere where we could bring and discuss that information on a more regular basis. Are there any views on that? I can see Joe nodding.
Thoughts, colleagues? I mean, I think the learning component of that is really important, isn't it? It's not just, you know, we've had X complaints, they've gone up, they've gone down, they're about these sorts of things. I mean, important though that is, it's you know, what do we take away from that allows the system to change to reduce the likelihood of complaints in future?
And I think those are exactly the messages that we need to be getting out to people, to say that we've heard and we've responded and we've changed in response to that. So we will be looking at how we do that. And as I said, we'll be happy to bring additional information as that starts to take shape.
Colleagues, anything, comments and questions on that one? Or is the board content to say, oh, Christine?
Sorry, yes. Yeah, I think that would be a good idea.
Good.
Thank you,
Yes.
Christine. We'll be happy to look at doing that.
Yes, and I think if that helps the council to build in the sort of learning loop and you know, feed that back into future performance, then that would be very positive.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, are we content that that's an update? When does the new system come into force? Remind us.
So the self-assessment needs to be published this year, and you know, that's terrible. I can't remember when it comes into force.
Sorry.
We'll put it in the no, don't worry about it. That is a perfectly valid question, and I can't remember the answer. I'll make sure we put that in the notes in the minutes.
Okay. Zara, were you going to?
Yeah, I was going to say, sorry, Sarah, I can't back you up on that on this occasion. I do apologise. I should know myself too, but sorry, I can't remember.
Okay, fine. Well, it's not urgent or crucial, but it would be nice to know when, because as I understand it, at the other end of this scale, the Ombudsman is also now publishing its judgments on individual landlords in a way that in the past haven't been so easy to identify. So it's sort of, you're coming at it from both ends. You know, landlords' transparency about what's happening, but at the same time, the Ombudsman is going to be reporting more visibly about the sorts of cases that are coming to it and what it's doing about them. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that. So that takes us to item 7, which is a COVID-19 update. So Zara, just want to talk us through how the council's been coping in the face of continued constraints on our activities.
Yeah, just bear with me.
Do you want me to share the slides, Zara? I've got them lined up and ready to go.
Go on then, if you've got them lined up, that's excellent, thank you. So we felt it appropriate to feed back to the board our response to the pandemic and the fact that it obviously has caused considerable disruption to the service that we've been able to provide to our tenants, you know, the normal service that we would wanted to have provided. But just to touch to start with on the staff, and before we get into the service, we've done, I mean, within Housing and Landlord Services, we work very closely with our public health and health and safety corporate colleagues over the home visiting risk assessments that we published. We were heavily involved in those discussions because we felt it right and appropriate that staff were given the utmost support going into people's homes in an unknown situation at the start of the first lockdown. So we worked with public health. We got the home visiting risk assessments published. Within our own teams, we changed our approach to the way that we offered our service. So anybody that rang us wanting a repair or rang us wanting us to visit in response, before every single visit that we've carried out during COVID, we've made sure that we've phoned in advance where we can. We've told the tenant that we're arriving. We've also said before we've arrived that when the person arrives on the doorstep, they may need to do a dynamic risk assessment. And from that, determine whether or not they can then move into the property, move into the home and carry out the requirements of the visit. So we made sure at the outset that we were working closely with our staff group and with public health to make sure that we were keeping them safe. With that said, We've also, we are part of the bigger picture around the City Council, and we have still had members of staff, although the default has been working from home, we've had members of staff that have still been working from our office locations. And again, where we have had staff working in our office locations, we have made sure that they are COVID safe, COVID secure, and there is a regular inspection regime to make sure that we are absolutely in the workplace mitigating the risk against infection. We have at all times adopted the government guidelines, and when we have had any updates to the government guidelines, we have made sure that we have we've published our approach on the website, on our webpage, in social media, and through direct contact with people where we've got email contact and where we've been able to put up posters in our communal areas. With regards the individual services, and I will go into estate management first, we have, throughout the second lockdown, we re-established normal service towards the end of August, and throughout the second lockdown, we have maintained normal service, adopting the practices that I've previously described. And there's been a concentration, because we know that we have had an increase in rent arrears over this period. There's been a concentration on support to people who have been in rent arrears. We've been talking specifically to local community representatives when there has been a genuine community issue, something like use of the laundries or something like that. We've made sure that we've had direct contact with local representatives, so we've been able to try to get solutions to any concerns that have been raised. We've absolutely put emphasis on ensuring that we can maintain repairing our empty homes in order to make sure that we can re-let them because of the numbers of people that we know that are on the waiting list. And we've, funnily enough, throughout this period, we can prove that we've improved the actual timeline for the repairs and the lettings period with regards being able to re-let our properties. We've also offered telephone support and more targeted support to our vulnerable residents, and that includes those who are in supported housing, so the older people property. We're making sure that we're having more regular contact than we did previously, just not just about making sure that they're okay from a welfare point of view, but also any support needs around medical issues and things like that where they can't get it elsewhere. We've been trying to support people through that too. And then on to my service area, which is the responsive repair service area. We've throughout had people out on site from day one, and for a large proportion of this year, as you can see from the dates, we were carrying out emergency repairs only, and that was in accordance with government guidelines. We resumed normal service, and what I mean by normal service is we started to book appointments for non-essential repairs, so plaster repairs, door repairs, those sorts of things that were less urgent during the earlier period. We've been able to rely on contractors to support us because we have needed the backup. We've certainly had a number of staff who have needed to go off due to self-isolation, and those, some of them have had some positive tests. So we've been able to have reliance on the contractors to help us. As I said earlier, we've made sure we're calling ahead so that we can know there and then if the circumstances have changed from the time that someone made an appointment for us to call. The dynamic risk assessment, that the individual on the spot able to make a decision on whether it's safe for them to enter, safe for the household members for them to enter, and just generally ensuring that the environment is as safe as possible in order to carry out the task. one of the other things that we've done within my service area is that we've been able to have a better relationship with the mobile staff. We've got them signed up to Zoom meetings, and rather than keep bringing in 40 fleet vehicles into the office so that we can hold a couple of team meetings, we've been able to do those meetings from site via Zoom meetings. And, and that's enabled us to also maintain service delivery. We've at all times, the priority is that people are safe out on site, and that we've at all times made sure that people have got the required PPE that is necessary. And also throughout all of this, I'm pleased to say that as part of our apprenticeship program, we've been able to secure 7 new trade apprentices that we've brought in September, and they've had their induction into their apprenticeship, and it's going really well for those young people. So is there any feedback? I mean, that's a whistle-stop tour on the services that we've been able to maintain. Is there anything that anybody would like to ask? Phil? Sorry, Alex.
I've got a question from Kerry via the chat.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see that.
Yeah, sorry, it's okay. So it's with regards to accessing the housing register. Whilst public buildings like libraries are closed, where would somebody go to fill in forms, provide evidence of need, where the person has no access to the internet? Has Temple Street been open? Where do people been signposted if not? So
Temple Street has stayed open for all urgent cases. So if someone has an urgent need, they will be able to access the service through Temple Street.
Okay. Philip.
Yeah, I mean, Zara knows that I think the response of the repairs team has been wonderful in this area, the area I know. But I have one criticism of them. They park on the drop curb. Now, as a wheelchair user, not a disability scooter, but a wheelchair user because of a stroke, I find it frustrating galore that they're parking outside Northfield House, where there's only one drop curb, unless you go 40 yards down the road, main road with bus route, to get to a zebra crossing, or as you're crossing the road, or they park outside Maudley House. Now, one end of Maudley House, there's no drop curbs. So if I go along the pavement, I can't get off. So I have to come off the pavement at the drop curb, which I'm not sure if I think Zara had it highlighted in yellow paint for us, because before you couldn't see it. But it's just really, really frustrating as a wheelchair user to have vehicles blocking drop curbs. And you don't know where the contractor is, or the Bristol City Council van, you don't know where they are.
I will pick that up and I will take that back, Phil. We do get complaints about people parking on hazards. We do get people complaining, and there is an instruction that people should be parking legally when they represent Bristol City Council and when they're driving a fleet vehicle. So I will send a reminder out again. You have my contact details if you need to contact me to let me know, and then I can immediately respond to it. But I will ensure that I get a message across to the workforce yet again.
It is happening up here in Hengrove as well, Zara.
Okay.
And I think people forget that drop curbs are, if you park across the drop curb, is parking illegally.
Yeah.
Because it's so rarely enforced.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you might need to make it explicit, do not park across.
Yep, I will do that, no problem.
Okay, thank you for that. Christine, you've got your hand up?
Yeah, back during the first lockdown, I had a letter, it's undated, so I can't be specific, about planned programme electric safety checks.
Yeah.
During the second lockdown, someone phoned me, because it was outsourced to Bath Property Management. Someone phoned me trying to make an appointment. I said, this is sheltered housing. We're all shielding here. I'm shielding. I've got instructions not to let people into my household. And he was saying, well, this is health and safety. So I said, well, I'm more concerned about my health and safety than electricity. And I felt that it was, a lesser person would have been intimidated So after the conversation, I did phone up housing and explain to them what was going on. But was I right or not? Because I don't think they should have been coming round.
The electric safety tests are something that we need to complete to comply with our responsibility as a landlord. So if it's a periodic safety test, then we would ask to enter. If there was an issue around your well-being or that it was going to be difficult with regards your own personal circumstances, it could be that we would rearrange it, but we would need to make sure that we meet the required timescale to meet.
Yeah, I understand that. My daughter told me you've got to have it done by March or something.
Yeah.
And the guy did say he'd phone me back.
So is it resolved, Christine, or do you need me to pick it up and take it forward?
I think it's resolved. It's just, like, should these contractors, where it's not responding to an emergency repair.
Yeah. Well, at the moment,
they lost the window. I know they can't be everywhere at once. They lost one window, and to try and do it in a second lockdown didn't seem right to me.
So with the second lockdown, there is specific guidance from the government that the construction industry maintain working, and that included repairs, visitors to our homes.
Oh, I didn't know that.
There was a specific paragraph with regards that. So we obviously then continued to maintain the normal service as opposed to return back to essential repairs only. So we were again guided by the government around that decision.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks for raising that, Christine. It sounds like that there might have been a messaging issue there to the tenants, if you like, in terms of being aware that this was something which sort of needs to be either override shielding or negotiate around shielding, that maybe that wasn't.
Absolutely.
That didn't get through at that side of the conversation.
And I will pick it up as an example of it wasn't as successful as it could have been.
Okay, well, thank you for that. Councillor Sargent, sorry, I'm calling you while you're dealing with urgent matters.
Yeah, it's very sweet actually. My 9-year-old's trying to offer me dinner, which is nice. Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question about the lifts and the issues around lifts in blocks where lifts are needed to be used, and because that seemed to be a bit of an issue in the first lockdown, that people's safety was a real concern, and obviously people needed to get up and down, and even for the very limited outside space that some families had outside the blocks of flats, they needed to be able to get in and out. And I don't know whether you did come up with any solutions or ways of kind of managing that risk a bit more than it appeared to have been in the past.
We didn't come up with a successful solution. No, I can't say that we did. We did put notices up to say that there should be not many people in the lift at any given time, but that hasn't been adhered to, and it has been difficult to manage that from an individual point of view per block. So no, we've tried to put the message out, but it wasn't as successful as we'd hoped. What we do say for any of our operatives, our mobile staff, is if there is a rush to the lift, if there are a number of people that are needing to use the lift, then obviously wait, step aside, make sure you give people the social distance that is necessary so that they can carry on with their business, and then we can go up at a later date. So we do from the point of view of our personal responsibility to our residents, we make sure that we let them go in first.
Okay, Zara, thank you. Councillor Godwin?
Yeah, just on that, we've had some quite specific issues in Barton Hill and Lawrence Hill on tower blocks, and sort of fear and safety really. So and just Joe talking about the lifts kind of reminded me of it really, because I think there are some additional layers of issues there in terms of lots of residents not having English as a first language, and maybe not having some of the sort of direct lines to some of the communications that are going out, or not feeling that they're as accessible to them. So I know that Angela Rafferty's been really helpful with us in terms of sort of being the liaison between the residents and BCC, and just, you know, trying to, there's lots of sort of laminated signs going up in several languages, like 5 additional languages we've had them put into, but unfortunately again they are sort of being torn down as quickly as they were going up, so that's an issue. And trying to sort of encourage, I think there's hand sanitizers have been put in some of those blocks, and I know that Mohammed Al Sharif's been doing some work in terms of getting face masks out, and just encouraging families to sort of just use the lifts as one bubble, as opposed to, you know, lots of different families using them at the same time. But I've been thinking about this quite a lot, and it's a real fine line, isn't it, between sort of landlord responsibility in terms of keeping those common areas safe, but also, you know, asking individual households to kind of take their precautions, as in, you know, washing their hands before they leave their flats, and then washing their hands as soon as they get back in, and all of that kind of stuff. And it's a bit of a delicate balance just to get that right, I think. That and I know Angela's been doing some really good work in that space, but I think we're probably not quite there yet in terms of finding that perfect balance. But that's not through lack of will or effort. I think it's just you know, there's some cultural stuff that makes that a little bit more tricky as well.
And you are right that the conversation is ongoing, because we know this isn't going away. So we will get better at this, and we will make sure that you know, the environment gets safer. But I can't update any more than Helen has around the relationship that Angela's had with the local residents at Barton Hill. But we can pick up, if there's anything that we can add to the minutes that will be of benefit for you for feedback, I'll make sure that I get that attached.
Matt, can I come back on that? I just wanted to make a suggestion. Now, you mentioned that you're putting hand sanitizer by the lifts. Is that going sort of on the wall next to the lift so that you can clean your hands before you go in?
I'm not sure, Joe, to be honest, of the detail of it. I just know it was something that came up because we had a meeting with the Somali Forum, which Sarah and I, again, were speaking this week about how actually, because, you know, there's no representative, I don't think, from that area in this meeting. And so they're sort of doing it via the Somali Forum. But it would be quite useful for the benefit of other residents, I think, to be able to have some of those conversations, you know, between all of us, because obviously we've got the 60 blocks across the city. But my understanding was that it was about kind of just that safe space. And the other thing that I forgot to add in was that you know, there's something about the caretakers as well, and sort of refocusing the caretakers on those regular cycles of cleaning of the common areas. But that inevitably means, you know, that they're not doing some of the other things that they might have been doing, and you know, that's sort of one of the COVID challenges, isn't it? You know, as you go into sort of a crisis mode, then what gets missed out from business as usual. So we have to be mindful of that, I guess, as well.
Well, it's just that I just wanted to just suggest that it's one of those things that if you are concerned about people not getting the message about the importance of cleaning their hands, the way to communicate with a lot of people, regardless of where they come from, is through their children. And actually having the hand sanitizer with sort of a smiley face on it and a bit of kind of like childlike messaging, that sort of can sometimes help, because if the kids are doing it, and also because they say some kids are super spreaders and they're more likely to pass it on anyway, wouldn't it be great if at least the kids are washing and cleaning their hands, and perhaps the parents will just see it and follow suit?
I agree with that. And I think right at the beginning, it's sort of got lost a bit now, but right at the beginning, you know, when the kids were doing the sort of hand washing to happy birthday and stuff, that was, I think, educating quite a lot of older people in the community about it. So I completely agree. And actually, one of the things that had caused so much concern in Barton Hill was the fact that one of the local schools, like pretty much in it, like Whitehall Primary, was pretty much isolating in its entirety. And that was really sort of triggering that fear from residents in the blocks, I think. And yeah, I mean, there's a laundries issue as well, isn't there, which we probably will go into at a different time. But yeah, it's been difficult, but you know, communication is the only way, isn't it, and trying to find those compromises. But I agree with you, Joe, like the best way we can do it is working with schools and the wider community as well.
Okay, thank you for that. On that, that's plenty to reflect on there. Philip, did you want to come in?
Yeah, I was just going to comment that I used to live in Barton Hill, and I still go there. And I was there yesterday, yesterday evening, coming out at about 7 o'clock in my wheelchair, and I had a hell of a job to stop people coming in the lift because I was traveling from the 10th floor to the ground, and the lift stops and people crowd in.
Yeah.
And I used to be on the board at Community at Heart. Now, I don't know if anyone objects to this, but I'll tell you now, a lot of the Somali people who live in Barton Hill do not read, especially the women, because I lived in Kenya for 5 years, and women aren't educated because it costs money. And a lot of the Somali and the Community at Heart, the neighbourhood board, recognise this, and we produced a newsletter every week called every month, can't remember what, Grassroots. And we also produced a Somali CD so that they could listen to it and know what was going on. Now, these posters you're putting up, I came out of Corbett House and there wasn't a poster anywhere. There was no hand sanitizer, there was nothing. And I've been 3 times during this lockdown to see my pal who's also disabled there. And it's chaos. And they will not get out of the lift. And I parked my chair right at the front of the lift and they squeezed past me. You know,
So some of the things, sorry, Phil, I didn't mean to talk over you. So we have been putting posters up, they have been coming down. We will keep on doing it. I will let the estates team know that there aren't any in Corbett. As well as putting up some of the written posters, we've been using some of the NHS posters that have got graphics. So they're suitable for people who may not read English or whose reading skills may be poor. And on the Bristol City Council website, there are also videos in different languages, and we've been trying to send out some of the links to those so that you manage that issue of people who may struggle to read some of the materials that go up. So we do explore as much as we can how we get that message out in a range of ways.
Can I just come back on that, please, just quickly? Yep. One of the things I thought of was if the council people went into Barton Hill Junior School and had an explanation with the children about the importance of this. And as I can't remember who said it, that the people rely on the children for interpretation. Well, if you could go spend some money, I know we haven't got any, but spend some money going into the Barton Hill Junior School and Whitehall School, explaining to the young children why they need to only have one household in a lift, etc., etc. Then they might get through to the parents.
So the point, so I think for the purposes of this meeting, we've got some key messages there about communication, about modes of communication. That clearly the council is alive to the issue, but there might well be a question mark about whether the sorts of channels that are being used are getting to all the people. So there's some other possibilities that we've maybe identified there.
You can have with public health for sure, I think, on that, Phil. I know that Christina's aware of some of the fears in Barton Hill, so I can pick that up with her, no problem.
Sorry, can I just come back on that, Helen and Alex? The COVID marshals, I actually spoke to a couple of them the other day, and we'd been discussing in our Avonmouth and Lawrence Western COVID group community development team about how to communicate better at the school gates, because that's another area where there's been a lot of problems, and you could be catching the people who are there are likely to be going back to those flats, and getting the COVID marshals to the school gates just to try and sort of remind people about the social distancing aspect there, which has been a problem. That could also extend to using the communal space in the flats. The only thing to bear in mind is that COVID marshals don't start work till 11 o'clock in the morning, and so if you want to try and communicate in the morning, you might have to ask one or two of them if they'd be prepared to change their hours, albeit temporarily. And I do think school gates are quite an effective way to communicate, and that also saves you from having to go into the school, which has its own share of issues.
Yeah, that's a great call, Jo.
Okay, so that's some helpful contributions there in terms of possible strategies. Anything else in relation to any other aspects of Zara's report on the COVID response that anybody wants to pick up on?
I think Kerry's put something in the chat.
Yeah.
So blocks have been, blocks that have cleaners or caretakers, have they been deep cleaned due to COVID, or have they been more often than usual? So in terms of, has COVID affected the way that the cleaning regime has been operating?
So on a daily basis, we have been cleaning more than once a day the access points, the door handles, and the buttons on the lifts and things like that. So we have been carrying out a constant cleaning regime on a daily basis in all of the blocks.
Okay. So anything else that anybody else wants to pick up on in relation to COVID, other than perhaps to fervently wish that by the time we get to the next meeting, this one isn't quite such an issue. So Kerry's come back with a question on that one, which is, have cleaners and caretakers been given overtime? So is this placed a greater burden on those members of staff?
It is increased hours for some of the staff, and we've also borrowed staff from some of the larger buildings like City Hall and Temple Street. So we've got people that have been supporting the caretakers to do that task. And at one point, the responsive repairs team, when we were in essential repairs only, we were also supporting going and cleaning the door handles of some of the blocks as well. But I know the caretakers and I know the cleaners are providing additional service to the normal, and that is continuing. So it could be overtime for some, but it's increasing the capacity to manage the workflow.
Okay, thanks for that, Zara. Kerry, is that giving you the information that you're looking for? I'll take that as hopefully yes. Okay, thank you for that. So we move, if we may, to the next item, which is the date of the next meeting. So Sarah, your thoughts were sort of March?
Yeah, so we normally meet quarterly, and I'm sure people will be aware that there are elections next year, so we'll need to avoid the election period. So I think that will give us a window of early to mid-March. So we'll look for some possible dates and canvass members about their availability.
Okay, thank you for that. So look out for that contact about setting a date. And that brings us to any other business, and I can't go around the table, so I will go round my screen and just check whether anybody's got any other business. So I will start with Councillor Godwin. Anything else you'd like to raise?
No, just thanks for it's been really interesting, and it's a really good forum, isn't it, to talk about some of these things. So yeah, just appreciate everyone's time, really.
Thank you, Councillor Clough. Anything?
No, I'm good, Alex. Thank you.
Excellent. Christine?
Could the minutes for this meeting be sent out before the area forums, please? I did ask a year ago, and the last forum, I couldn't remember anything.
When is the next forum?
I don't know.
Oh, right. So I'll do them as quick as I can. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
So in terms of process, in terms of completing the loop between this board and the area forums, and being able to share sort of some of the issues.
As the area representative, I meant to give a report,
Sure,
and
exactly.
Last time I'd completely forgotten what had happened, because being virtual, there's nothing tangible to remind you. And thankfully, Zara remembered and did it for me.
Yes, no, it seems absolutely sensible that these two things need to mesh together, so that the minutes need to be available to the tenant reps in time for the next board meeting, the next meeting of their area forums, for sure. Point well made. Kerry, anything you'd like to add? Okay, no. So we'll take that as a no. Liz, any other business?
No, thank you, Alex.
Philip, you got your hand up, so over to you.
You're on mute, Phil.
You got your hand up, but your microphone off. There you go.
You're still on mute.
You're on mute. Get off mute.
Sorry, it's this technology is on top of me. I'm 78, so forgive me. It's a rather delicate issue. very delicate issue. But I hope, well, I don't know because I'd never heard of it, Sarah's Law. On Sunday last week, the police, 6 police officers, went to one of my neighbour's door and beat hell out the door, and she got out of bed at 7 o'clock in the morning. 6 policemen outside her door. What they asked her if a certain person was with her, and it turned out he was on the sex register, and she'd got her grandchildren staying with her. Now, and we did, and the police told her that he's on the sex. They wouldn't say what he'd done, but they said he was on the sex register, and they arrested him because he was in breach of his terms by being in close proximity to young children. Now, I just feel the council, I know you can't broadcast it, but I think the council should be more aware when that situation arises. This man is housed in a tower block of flats where there are not many children living, but lots of grandchildren. And he's a very amenable man. I've known him for about a year, and he's very amenable and very friendly like. But it made me feel sick that this guy was running around where there's all young children. And I just feel the council should have some, I don't know whether the council know if anyone's on the sex register or not. I've no idea. But I just feel that something should be done because the council do have a responsibility to their tenants. And this, seriously, made me sick. The lady still hasn't recovered from it. She's sat here now in my kitchen. She doesn't want to be alone at the moment. And I think, as I say, it's something that should be addressed. It's called Sarah's Law, but somebody's got to go to the police and ask them if a certain person is on the sex register. And then the police have a duty to tell you. But, you know, I just feel the council are missing out here somewhere. It's a very serious issue.
Well, can I suggest that that's a clear challenge posed, and that we invite colleagues to take that one away and give it some thought and maybe give us a response next time around, because you know,
Yeah.
I think it's a big issue to wrestle with at this point in this meeting. So it might be better to go away and have a considered response to it. The point well made, though.
Well, thank you, sir.
Thank
Peter,
you. I think we will take that away.
yeah, Peter, anything you'd like to add at this point?
Yeah, well, this is as I say, this is my first meeting, and I found it quite enlightening, the subjects that have been discussed tonight. And yes, I'm quite happy with it. Thank you.
No, that's great. Well, thank you. Thanks for joining us. Zara, any other business?
No other business except to wish everybody a really happy Christmas in really difficult circumstances.
Indeed. Councillor Sargent?
Yeah, just to follow up on what was it Christine said about the minutes. I think I was a little bit confused because the tenants forums have taken a different format now, haven't they?
Yeah.
And that might be difficult to get. I don't know, because I mean, I suppose if the tenants forums are happening shortly before the housing management forum, as they appear to have done this time, it might be almost the other way round in the issue of about getting information in time for a meeting. But noticing that the tenants forums, there's 4 of them. There were 4 of them recently, and they weren't geographically specific. They were subject specific. Unfortunately, I missed them all because I didn't get a diary invitation, because that's the only way I can remember when things are, is when I get a bing reminding me that they're actually happening. So I just wanted to add that it might be tricky to get minutes, but as these things are specific, subject specific now rather than geographically specific, perhaps it's important to make sure that everyone's got relevant papers before those meetings happen, so they know what they're getting themselves into.
Thank you, Jo. If I can just mention the subject-specific local housing forums, we tried that because the attendance had dropped off while we were online. So we've tried that just for, is it one-off, to see how it works, and then we'll review what we do next time. So yes, it was, for want of a better term, a bit of an experiment to see if it was a good way of getting people along to the meetings and managing those. So we'll do a little review now.
Yeah, because I was disappointed to miss the antisocial behaviour one. I would have liked to have attended, but I just forgot that it was on. Sorry.
Okay, thank you for that. Pete, any other business?
Yeah, 3 very quick ones. Picking up on what Jo was saying about the subject-specific forums, I was disappointed that the digital link to Housing News that I was sent, which contained the invite to those forums, was sent after all 4 forums had taken place. So having not yet invented time travel, I was unable to participate. I'm also slightly lost, and I don't know whether Steve can help with this. Would it be possible to get an email about the date of the next Homes and Communities Board? Because as you know, I represent this board on that board, but I've lost track of when the next meeting is as part of the switch over to Zoom. So an update on that would be very helpful. I do also want to talk to Dr. Matt Wood in terms of synchronizing what the One City programme is doing across the boards. And I'm very pleased that the boards that make up the One City programme have started talking to each other, which has been a very, very positive benefit. The third, very less quick point is a question that arrives from the forum I represent, and possibly also touches in with something Philip was saying earlier. So to anonymise the situation, a problem tenant has had a criminal past. There's been police involvement, police regularly arresting the individual. Out of the last 12 months, the individual has not been in their home for 9 of them. So the question being posed by the tenants living around them is, what happened to the Housing Act 1988's award of eviction for criminal offence within the vicinity of the property? You know, the 88 Housing Act was very clear that if a local authority landlord requests an eviction following an arrestable offence within the vicinity of the property, it is mandatory. The county court judge is not allowed to object. And yet, repeatedly, what we're seeing, and I'm hearing anecdotally in lots and lots of cases, is tenants are committing criminal acts, they're going to court, they're being convicted, they're going to prison for more than 13 weeks, and landlord services are not serving eviction notices, are not taking antisocial behaviour action, and residents who are being impacted negatively by the behaviour of selfish individuals with criminal intent feel that there's no action being taken. So I guess it's a big question. It's about antisocial behaviour, criminality, and the use of eviction orders. And I wonder if it would be possible to have a statement about that.
Sarah?
I was going to say, possibly in the same way that we'll take away Phil's comment and then feedback. I think we'll do the same with that one, Pete.
A considered response, I think, would be appropriate to that one, both in terms of policy.
Sorry to interrupt there, Professor Marsh. It would be lovely, Sarah, because there's a balance. I appreciate, you know, that there's been in the private sector, there's been a suspension of evictions, and I appreciate there's people struggling just about managing, and lots of people who are worried that they may be evicted for rent arrears. But that's not the instance here. This is about criminality. This is about more than antisocial behaviour. This is about criminal behaviour resulting in convictions, and those convictions resulting in custodial sentences, and then the impression that the police and landlord services don't talk to one another and don't take action. That's the impression that's coming across on estate after estate. And Helen probably sees this in Southmead, where, you know, I'm hearing it. I'm having people approach me about individual circumstances of tenants who've spent months in prison, the property being empty, and the neighbours questioning, why is that? What's going on there? What's the protocol between the police and the landlord services team? What's the length of time beyond which it would be reasonable to question whether eviction should take place? And what are the circumstances in which landlord services will request an automatic eviction order on grounds of criminal behaviour convicted within the immediate vicinity of the tenancy in accordance with the 88 Housing Act?
Okay, thank you. I'll take that away.
The point is clearly made, and it feels to me like it's a topic upon which it may be appropriate to reflect both on policy and practice, in the sense that the extent to which the policy is borne out by the practice or on the ground, and just get a feel for how that manifests itself. Can I go to Ross next for any other business?
I've got nothing, Alex.
No, that's great. Well, thanks for that. Philip, you got your hand up. We're not, is it quick?
Yeah, it's just, am I mute? No, it's just regarding to Pete. There is a famous case, because I studied antisocial behaviour law at Sheffield Hallam, and there's a famous case where Manchester City Council versus Morrissey, which went to the Supreme Court, and the council succeeded in obtaining a repossession order, not an eviction, a repossession order, because of not criminal conviction, not criminal attitude, behaviour, but because of his behaviour towards his neighbours and other people, which resulted in criminal conviction.
Okay, so the question has been posed. I think to expect an off-the-cuff answer today would be a bit of challenging. So we'll note that in the minutes, and we'll take it away and invite the council to give us a picture of how these sorts of cases are doing. Because clearly, if it's coming up in different places, there's a broad interest in understanding quite how this is being managed at the moment. Sarah, any other business from yourself?
No, kind of as with Zara, I'd just like to wish everyone a happy Christmas and thank you ever so much for your contributions today, but also during the year. All of the board meetings have been engaging and interesting, so thank you very much for people who take the time out to attend these and participate.
Indeed. And Steve, anything from you?
Yeah, that's right, Chair. Thanks.
Fantastic. Okay, so I won't. I will say also thank you so much to everybody. Those of you that have been with the committee all year, those of you that have joined for the first time, and you're getting a feel for how we operate on the board. And I'll say also, I hope you have a restful period over the Christmas period, and face 2021 fully refreshed for all that it might throw at us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Thank you,
Happy
Professor.
Christmas.